Plea of the Damned 2 Forgive Me Aiden, written by Avril Sabine. Dedication. Once again, this is for all of you who have ever made a mistake, and wanted to take it back the moment it was made. Book description. Plea of the Damned. Have you ever done something and immediately wished you could undo it? Jack knows that feeling very well. He's damned, bound to haunt his old school and help students until he atones for his sins. It's the last thing he wants to do. But since the alternative is an eternity in hell, he's not about to say no. Book 2, Forgive Me Aiden. Aiden has been waiting for years to live with his father again. He knows this time will be different. His father has promised it will be. But somehow things aren't turning out like he expected. The ghost he met can't be right. Things will improve. He just needs to figure out how to solve all the problems piling up before someone gets hurt. Chapter 1. Jack. Jack Richards leaned against one of the buildings, watching the craziness of the last day of school, as everyone left for the Easter holidays. Even though he was unable to feel the temperature, his leather jacket was slung over one shoulder, so that he wore only his white t-shirt and jeans. Several meters away he saw Lucy giving Jasmine a hug, laughing at something her friend said. When Jasmine squealed at Lucy's reply, Jack winced, glad he was far enough away not to have to experience the full effect of that sound. It had been a few weeks since he'd helped Lucy and he hadn't seen the angel once. Not even a glimpse. How was he meant to atone for all his sins if they didn't let him help anyone? Or maybe that was the plan. He wouldn't be surprised if it was deliberate. Get his hopes up, then make him wait for ages before they let him help anyone else. Why hadn't that blasted bird returned? He was pretty sure the angel was too perfect to do something as commonplace as forget about him. Any forgetting would be on purpose. Just like the supposed 49 years he was meant to have waited before he could start atoning for his sins. Leaving him wait longer was sure to have been deliberate. Had the angel apologized? No, of course not. That blasted bird had acted like it was his own fault. If he had anyone he could complain to, he probably would have. As it was, the only one he could complain to was the angel, who disregarded every single complaint he'd made last time. He still couldn't believe they expected him to offer help and guidance. Setting him a task like that was almost like they were hoping he'd fail. Yeah, get the major screw-up to help others. Good plan. He moved away from the wall that he hadn't really been leaning against, and turned his back on the students leaving for the holidays. Some habits were hard to break, and leaning against things, even when he couldn't actually touch anything, was one of them. Sliding his arms into his leather jacket, he strode in the direction of the groundsman's shed where he'd created his own little space. The sound of students was left behind and he didn't see any as he crossed the grounds. Not that he blamed them. Who'd want to hang around any longer than they had to on the day the holidays started? Ahead of him he saw the stand of trees the groundsman's shed was nestled amongst. It wasn't much of a place, but it was out of the way and he'd managed to claim a section of the timber shed for himself. It had taken ages to push the wardrobe away from the wall. The first time had taken several years. During those early years the groundsman had kept pushing it back into place. Each time he'd pushed it away from the wall, it had become easier. Now they left it alone. It had to have been at least a couple of decades since the groundsman had tried to push the wardrobe against the wall. There'd been a lot of questions and accusations, but in the end they'd shrugged and accepted it as fact. The wardrobe wouldn't stay against the wall. Even though he couldn't touch anything and could only sometimes move things and unlock doors through force of will, he'd still wanted his own space. Being stuck around people who couldn't see or hear you all the time got a bit too much. And it wasn't like he could leave the school grounds to get away from everyone. Which brought him back to his original thought. Why hadn't the angel told him about someone else who needed help? How long was he going to make him wait? It better not be years. Blasted bird, he muttered as he reached the groundsman's shed, which was locked. About to step straight through the door, a voice behind him had him turning around. Nice to see you being your usual cheery self. Have you considered that working on your attitude might make your days a little more bearable? Jack glared at the angel. What would he know? You couldn't have come sooner? How am I meant to atone for my sins if you don't let me help anyone? Didn't you hear me call out several times that I wanted to know who I was to help next? I heard. This school isn't filled with endless people in major trouble. He hadn't thought of that. You could have told me. Ignoring someone is bad manners. Don't angels have standards they have to live up to or something? The blasted bird enjoyed making a fool of him. What would it have hurt for the angel to have popped in, said he'd be back when he found someone who needed help, and that there was no one currently in need? He wasn't the only one who needed to work on his attitude. It sounds like you'll be happy to hear I have someone who needs help. No. But they're all going on holidays. Typical. Give him an assignment and make him wait to complete it. How am I meant to help anyone if they're not here? Another thought occurred to him. Or are you letting me leave the school grounds? That'd be good. He could find his way around this place with his eyes closed. It'd be nice to have a break from it. No. He'll be here Saturday night. A possible future student. Depending on the choices he makes. He tried to mask his disappointment, and barely stopped himself from asking if he'd ever be allowed to leave the school grounds. Why would someone come to a school at night? His eyes narrowed. Unless they're up to no good. Ah, the voice of experience talking. Out of habit, Jack started to deny the accusation. He stopped before he'd uttered a sound. Angels probably weren't that easily fooled, and he was pretty certain this angel knew all his past sins. The minor ones as well as the major ones. Are you going to tell me his name? Or are you going to be more helpful than last time and actually tell me what needs doing, instead of making me guess? Aiden. And that's it? No clues about what he needs help with? And is he meant to make decisions that'll make him a student, or is he meant to avoid those choices? The angel slowly shook his head, making a sound of disapproval. Are you still expecting me to do your job for you? No, but, he broke off, thinking about how difficult it had been trying to figure out what Lucy had needed help with. Don't you want them to have a chance? Of course I do, that's why you've been asked to help. The question is, do you want them to have a chance? The angel gave Jack an angelic smile before he disappeared. Blasted bird. He turned and walked through the door of the groundsman's shed. It wouldn't have hurt the angel to have at least given him a hint about Aiden's problem. Was that too much to ask? And of course he wanted them to have a chance. Just because he'd screwed up his life, didn't mean he wanted other kids to do the same. Not that he wanted to help them either, but what choice did he have in the matter? He'd been assured he wouldn't like the alternative. He had no idea how bad hell was, and he didn't want to find out. Jack strode through the clutter in the groundsman's shed, and to his area behind the wardrobe. At this time of day, although there was very little light coming into the shed, there was more than enough for him to see the picture on the wall. His annoyance at the angel faded, as he came to a stop in front of it. Even though he couldn't touch anything, he reached out, his hand stopping millimeters away from the face of the girl in the picture. If he managed to atone for all his sins, would Rose forgive him? She told him never, but there wasn't a day that went by that he didn't regret her death. How did you atone for that? He feared it wasn't possible. He dropped his hand to his side. If he could have taken it back, he would have. But some mistakes could never be fixed. He heard the sound of the gunshot echoing through his memories. It was a sound he could never forget.